Kindergarten. It literally translates to Garden of Children, symbolically representing a place where children can grow and thrive. Friedrich Froebel created kindergarten in 1837. Fröebel was born April 21st, 1782 in Thuringia, then a part of Prussia, now a part of Germany. He was born, and shortly after his mother passed away. He was neglected as a child, being the youngest of 5 kids. His uncle offered to take him in when he was 10. He was there, he thrived, he took up botany and later mathematics and languages. But it was really botany because Thuringia had these beautiful forests and herbs and plants where he could really discover and learn about everything around him. He earned an apprenticeship with a forester for a number of years and eventually took a teaching position as an assistant to a teacher in a school that was modeled after Swiss educator Johann Pestalozzi's methods. It was here that Fröebel discovered his passion for learning, and he went to Switzerland to learn directly from Pestalozzi about his methodology. And this was an accelerant in Fröebel's life and in his future endeavors. Now, Pestalozzi was inspired by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, as was Fröebel. They both were interested in his treatise of Emile, which highlighted the education system and the nature of man, and deciphering the relationship between the individual and society. Pestalozzi really was hooked on this idea, and he designed his school to strengthen students' own abilities and encourage them to think for themselves, and taught them in groups based off of their abilities rather than their age, and really taught the nature of the child rather than the structure that was in place before. Fröebel, being there, training with him, started to see a few shortcomings in Pestalozzi's methods, and he began to develop his own theories. He returned to Thuringia, where he established his first school in 1816, but it wasn't until much later where he started implementing his own theories and ideologies. He wrote a book in 1826 called The Education of Man, and here he highlighted the importance and the emphasis on development in early education and in childhood development. He eventually opened his first infant school in 1837, named Child Nurture and Activity Institute. It was centered around self-activity and play, and inspired by the children, he renamed it Kindergarten, Garden of Children. And it was his connection to nature and gardening that structured the curriculum for the kindergarten. He thought that by doing and discovering, designating, and deciphering what things were for the child themselves was a much more abundant educational experience than to communicate it verbally. He was under a lot of scrutiny, being under Prussian rule. The Prussian government sent a superintendent to observe his facility, and he is quoted as saying, "The pupils, great and small, live in joyousness and serenity, freely intermingling as if each obeyed only his own law, like the sons of one father. And while all seem unrestrained and use their powers and carry on their plays in freedom, they are under the constant supervision of their teachers, who either observe them or take part in their plays, equally subject with them to the laws of the game." Fröebel believed that children really dictated the level of their learning by what interested them, and that teachers were there to engage with them and guide them. There were designated instruction periods, but children were much more likely to have self-discipline because they were self-governing in their own play in the gardens. Fröebel is quoted as saying about the child as he learns is to enjoy his first knowledge as the first contribution toward his future intellectual treasure. meaning that the child has engaged himself in the learning experience, and that self-activity of the mind is the first law of instruction. So we see a lot of the Froebelian methods implemented today. He had a huge impact on our educational system, as well as the psychology of children and the development of children as they learn. He had a large following, in particular with women, and they brought his ideas to England, France, and the Netherlands. It eventually made it to the US in 1856 by Marguerite Schurz. She opened a German-speaking kindergarten in Wisconsin. And then in 1860, Elizabeth Peabody opened the first English-speaking kindergarten in Boston. Since then, in 1914, all major city school systems had publicly funded kindergarten, and today over 42 states mandate every school district offer it. It's still in the 4 to 6 age range, and 84 to 88% of 5-year-old children attend preliminary school each year. About 77% of children attend preliminary school full-time. And Froebelian methods are using building blocks. He invented building blocks, called them gifts. This was to stimulate children into challenging their minds with different ways of building and playing. He had them gather in circles, which was to connect them in a social environment. He created nursery songs and rhymes to make learning more engaging, and he wrote a book, and what followed each song was the meaning behind it and what it would teach the children. We see play to this day, and these are Froebelian methods. So I'll leave you with this quote. "Children are like tiny flowers. They are varied and need care, but each is beautiful alone and glorious when seen in the community of peers."